Welcome back to a bonus edition of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. My name is Greg Normand, your host. Well, there's an interesting story that developed yesterday about the Riptide sailing run by Chris Poole, the great match racer, is going to challenge for the America's Cup in 2027, bringing the first American syndicate to the table. And there was all kinds of print. We wanted to get the chance to tell you a little bit about the opportunity, and we tracked Chris down in Newport, and we talked to him, and that's going to be our sort of bonus show for this year. We've closed the doors as we did about a month ago, but I think this is a really important opportunity to talk to Chris a little bit about the America's Cup. We're in the middle of doing our Inside Great Lakes skiing show, and we're out in Colorado for the Birds of Prey, but we found a laptop, and we had a chance to interview Chris, and we actually interviewed him a couple hours ago. I think you'll find this to be an interesting story, and I'm rooting for this guy because he's one of the best racers in the world. Obviously, match racing is all about the America's Cup. You think that the best racer in the world that's a match racer would have that opportunity. So we talked to Chris, and we'll bring that conversation to you, and we'll bring that to you in just a couple seconds. Welcome back. We're getting an opportunity to talk to Chris Poole, one of the best match racer in the United States, and talk a little bit about a vacant America's Cup opportunity that you're throwing your hat into the ring. This is now the 6th of December. And Chris, it was certainly big news that this has kind of come about. We'll get a chance to talk to you. We're in Colorado, and I'm assuming you're still back there in Long Island. Am I correct?
Actually in Westport, Connecticut.
Okay. Well, maybe just kind of give us the short term, and then we'll get into the whole conversation. You're obviously going to take a shot at the only American entry so far into the America's Cup.
Yeah, well, it's always been a dream of mine to go to the America's Cup, and part of why I created Riptide Racing and got into the whole game of match racing. And, I've watched the last, cups and observed and taken a lot of notes and looking at the protocol that has been put out for the next America's Cup and the rules in the America's Cup Partnership Agreement. It all kind of trended towards there's an opportunity here for a new team. And so there were some, quiet discussions going on over the last few months. And then when the news came out that American Magic was going to step away for at least this cycle, there was an opportunity and an opening for a new American team to potentially jump into the ring. And we're not disillusioned to how big of the shoes that we would have to fill to replace American Magic as that American entry. And we know the challenge of the Cup is not a small one, but yeah, we think there's an opportunity and an interest within the U.S. to see a U.S. team there. And, our plan is going to be a little bit different than probably some of the Cup syndicates that have gone before us. But we're confident that our plan can succeed.
Okay, let's deal with the short term version of things and
Okay.
the rest of it. First and foremost, you have to have a boat. You're looking at purchasing maybe one of the boats that are available. Is that part of the way that's going to go?
Yeah, the plan right now with the timeline is that we don't have time to per se build a new boat. So we're going to look at purchasing an existing AC-75 and modify it accordingly to have it ready to be sailed next October.
I'm assuming there's been conversations with somebody who may own a boat that size.
We have discussed with a couple of different groups that have AC-75s to the potential avenues involved in acquiring the necessary assets for our team.
Can we ask in the neighborhood of how many millions?
That number is still in discussion.
Under or over 10? Leave it at
Over 10.
Okay, we'll leave that one alone. Second big hurdle, January 31st is a deadline for entry, and that means you have to acquire a boat by that, right? Am I correct on that?
I don't believe we have to acquire a boat, but we do have to officially submit our entry and pay the entry fee and the America's Cup partnership fee by January 31st to be allowed entry into the next America's Cup.
I know what it cost for me for my double-handed race on Monday night for my entry fee at Crescent. I'm assuming the America's Cup was a little bit more.
The America's Cup is a little bit more. We're talking in the millions of dollars, seven-figure entry fee. Um, and so not a small number by any means, but not out of the reach.
You've mentioned that you're looking at a $50 million fundraiser for putting this together. And I'm going to say this, and I've asked you already before we started this interview. I don't want to mess up the name of the Corinthian Yacht Club. So if you'll say it first, I'll go back to trying to say it correctly.
Swanica Corinthian Yacht Club is the club we'll be sailing under.
Okay, that club has been around since 1871. We're going to talk a little bit about the Salonica rule and how that all fits. So they've got some experience in this because they've been around for a long time. That being the case, the fundraising started when, and where are you in the fundraising at this point?
Yeah, we've had obviously some initial discussions behind the scenes, and we're confident with where we're at right now. But obviously, nothing's confirmed until you have it in your hand. And word of mouth is great, but we're going on the assumption that until you have it, it's not real, which I think is a safe way to approach this. But we're happy with the way discussions have been going before we're coming public, and the response over the last 24 hours has been pretty incredible and positive. So, we're full speed ahead.
You're an incredibly smart guy. What do we say to those folks who think this is a publicity stunt?
Uh, I think just wait and see. You'll be pleasantly surprised.
Okay. Which brings me to my biggest question. When we interviewed you about 18 months ago when you were in Chicago, one of the things we talked about was sort of maybe your frustration, and those are my words, but your frustration in not being able to find a bigger ride. And my point to that is you were the number one match racing sailor in the world at the time. And the point is, the America's Cup is all about match racing. And now you have this great opportunity. And I guess I would not sleep on Chris Poole's ability to sail. And maybe that's part of that premise. Am I in the ballpark at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone comes from a different background and skill sets, and the top sailors always make it to the top. And our route was through the World Match Racing Tour and the one-on-one discipline. And, as much as the America's Cup is a technology and design game, as we've seen in, rules past, as the rules continue each generation, the boats get closer and closer together in performance. And so that inherently brings it back to the game of one-on-one match racing. And, I'm not, you know, unaware of the massive hill that I will have to climb in developing my foiling skills and those skill sets, but I will also make sure that I bring in the necessary people that will complement my weaknesses and allow me to see how far I can go.
How many lawyers on the Riptide staff to read through the 900 pages that were put together by Grant Dalton and the folks down in Auckland?
Not enough, but we're working on it.
Is that amazing that there's that many pages? And I go all the way back to we had talked earlier about Tom Eman. I lived in San Diego in the the 80s and the early 90s of all the lawsuits that went through then. So this is not a first time the legality of the sport has been pushed, but you got to be pretty smart to read all the book rules on what's going up for this race.
Yeah, you have to be well versed and prepared for all the little circumstances and pitfalls that might, come with this kind of challenge. But the people around us are, the right people, and I trust them to make sure that we're as best prepared as we can be.
I'm assuming that budgets are important to even folks who are billionaires, but in your case, can you win an America's Cup on a shoestring budget? And I'm not suggesting 50 million is a shoestring budget, but obviously you're going to have to watch your pennies as you're building.
Yeah, we're not disillusioned. We don't have a principal backer at this point, and that's not necessarily a problem is in our view. Obviously, it's great when you have somebody, behind you to support you and make sure you get everything in a row going. But that's not the only way to get there. And no, we're not too worried about the objectives and the end goal. Like this is going to be a first challenge of ideally two is our target. We know that we are 2 cycles behind in this rule, and we are going to put all of our resources that we have into developing and design, and we're going to look for potential advantages we can gain on our competitors. But to say that we're going to come in and win it would be great, but we're not, we're not disillusioned that the mountain we have to climb is quite high.
Does maybe a little not being familiar with all of the crevices that you can potentially fall in, does that maybe give you an advantage over those who you might look past something that somebody else might be hesitant about? Not necessarily knowing everything you need to know is sometimes a godsend, especially when you go through things for the first time.
Yeah, it is a potential, avenue of success that we could find ourselves in is that, we enter this with a fresh set of eyes and we find a new path and a new angle of design and development that maybe another team hasn't thought of. But, we're going to cross that bridge when we get there. The first hurdle is securing the funding to give us the green light to go ahead and enter the cup. And then the real work will begin then.
There are obviously two guys involved already. There's a conversation about Luna Rossa coming in as that fourth team. If you're going to be the announced third team, do you see a full field for the challenge?
Yeah, I think you'll see 4 to 5 teams, maybe 6. I'll say that we're going to be the oddball out here and be the 6th team. But just as we are a late entry to this whole thing. But I think the next America's Cup looks quite promising. I think the direction they're taking with the America's Cup partnership agreement is good for the longevity of the cup and the future of this, event to grow and become a quite successful series. Um, and that's what, is kind of enticing us to want to go for it.
You have a Sail GP shirt on, and I asked
Sail racing.
Sail racing. My mistake. It looks like I can. Okay, but let me ask.
He's prominent in the top of sailing everywhere.
We've seen a lot of conversations about the sort of the end of the America's Cup because of Sail GP, and I think they're completely different items. I really do. I think they fit completely different niches.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say because of that, as soon as you pop up that you guys are going to challenge everything, all of a sudden it's we flip the term, which is the nature of news, right? It's today it's good, and tomorrow it's not. I don't think I don't think you'd have an American Cup challenge without an American team, which is what you're providing. But do you think that there's any correlation between those two organizations, or do you really think that they're separate entities?
I think that, obviously the sailors that compete in both series are, the same athletes. When you look at guys like Slingsby and Nathan Otteridge and Pete Burling, those are the guys that you see in the cup. But I think from a outside perspective, I think the two series are complementary but not competitors. I think the design and the history of the America's Cup, I would compare it to, endurance racing and, 24 hours of Le Mans versus and Formula One versus like NASCAR. Like they're both sports
Right.
within the same genre like motorsport, but they're two very different beasts.
The rules for the next cup are quite different as they've negotiated through those 800 or 900 pages of rules. You have to have a female aboard. I'm almost positive. There's no more bike riders. It all has to be self-powered, electric powered. Does that create good opportunities? Or is it just something you got to learn with, or explain that a little bit?
Yeah, they've opted to go down this route as part of the cost saving measures to bring in electrical power for the first time, which I understand. I'm also disappointed. I have a lot of friends that were, grinders and cyclors in the past cups, and to lose that element is unfortunate, but I also understand from a cost perspective, having those guys and their, professional athletes and their top dollar, and, it's not, and you got to have multiple of them in the, on the bench ready to go. So it will be a huge cost savings. But I think the addition of having a requirement to have a female sailor is great. I think there's a huge avenue to there's a lot of untapped talent within the women's sailors, especially in the United States. So we're looking forward to kind of, going into that field. And, they say you have to have one. We're not opposed to maybe having two if there's if the skill is there, and we think that two females is better than 4 males and 1 female, then that's the route we'll go.
Where do you start building a crew? Do you build it with familiar sailors, guys you've worked with in match racing, or do you look for the best sailors? Or is part of building that crew also like any other team where you've got to have the chemistry that goes with it?
Yeah, well, I think one thing that Riptide's done really well over the last few years on the match racing tour is we have a knack for putting really good teams together that, the camaraderie is there, but the work ethic and the focus and the way each team member has taken on whatever role it is on the boat and wherever we're racing, no one's bigger than another person. And that's kind of the big focus that I've always had with the team is I don't need the best sailors. I want the right sailors. And the right sailors come together in a much, better way than necessarily having, that all-star personality on the boat. But that being said, we're not, we understand that we need the best sailors around us. And we think there's a pool of sailors out there that we can fill the boat with that will be competitive.
As a skipper, are you going to try to? And again, answer, don't answer. But is it the guys that are comfortable that you're with that you've already sailed with? Does that seem to be maybe a step up over somebody who might be good that you're not necessarily aware of?
No, I think the guys I've been sailing with on Riptide are without a doubt skilled enough to do this. But the issue is the nationality rules. And a lot of my guys, I've found an international team of really talented sailors, Joachim Aschenbrenner from Denmark, Mal Parker and Luke Payne from Australia, and Matt Cornwell from the UK. Those last three all have, America's Cup backgrounds, multiple cup campaigns under their belts. But they also haven't been, they're not from the United States. And that, when you start looking into those nationality rules, you have to make sure you meet those requirements. But they will be involved in some capacity in the team as we go ahead with this.
Is Riptide set up in a place where you can start to worry about sailing and finding boats rather than dealing with the business side? And the follow-up question to that would be, what happens to your match racing career over the next 18 months?
Yeah, so we're not at the point where I can focus solely on sailing. We are, very much in this fundraising phase. We've, had a lot of really good chats and initial interest from people all over the United States, and we're very happy with that, the way those conversations are going. But nothing happens until we're actually in the cup, so we need the money first. But aside from that, I am working on the plans for when this happens and when we enter the cup, we need to start sailing almost day one as soon as we can. And there's a couple different pathways to get that done. And yeah, so we're, it's kind of all the pieces on the board are moving right now, and I'm not dedicated to one. But to your second question, what happens to my match racing? Our plan is still to campaign and race on the World Match Racing Tour at all of the events that, we're able to. The tour is 5 to 6 events, and we think the skill sets are, it's still match racing, so it's a good mental skill set to keep sharp. And the tour is also a great platform for marketing and advertising, and we think we can do both. Now, when the now 2027 comes around, that might be the year you see us step away from the cup, but or from not from the cup, but from match racing. But then, the plan is to try and incorporate as much of it as we can.
You're laying in bed before you make this decision of actually, okay, I'm going to jump off this cliff. What what went through your mind, and did you really? I mean, what was the buzz inside your brain? Because it had to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely a daunting step to take. You're opening yourself up to a lot of scrutiny and a lot of opinions. It's not just, oh, we're doing a World Match Racing, or we're doing the America's Cup, or we're trying to, anyways. And it's a massive step. But I've continually taken big steps in my sailing career and continued to succeed when each step of that I've taken. And, that belief is kind of what got me over the edge. But you can't do something like this without a little bit of nerves. And I was definitely nervous, wondering how, the United States and the sailing community might react. But overall, I think it's really positive. I think people want to see an American team in the cup. And if that gets to be us, then, we're really excited to do that and, fly the Stars and Stripes and represent our country in Naples.
We were dominant for more than 75 years. It's been the last 20 have been pretty tough. Why have we not? Any thoughts as to why we haven't been there? I don't think it's lack of sailing or sailing talent. I think it's just bad luck.
Oh, I mean, I think you look at the cup and it's very much do or die, and it's a long campaign, and decisions you make early can affect you long term all the way to the very last race. And from that standpoint, that could be the hurdle. Maybe one misstep here or there. I mean, it opens, you know, there's a multitude of things that can go wrong in a campaign like this, and I don't think it's a lack of skill, as you said. I think it's just the way things have kind of, panned out. Sometimes it goes your way, and sometimes it doesn't.
We were in Barcelona last summer, and one of the things that the world has seemed to going to is having this sort of discussion in sailing, whether they're moving towards foiling, whether they're going to stay in, sort of traditional boats. The television folks who drive a lot of that discussion because of revenue are wanting things to move towards foiling, which obviously fits into the America's Cup. But when they're on ESPN Plus, as compared to a regular like news station, or in this case, they were getting preempted a lot of times across the country. And I know for a fact in the West Coast, pickleball went on in place of the third leg of one of the America's Cup races. That said, do you think you have the ability, not as an individual, but as a group, to get people excited about coming back and watching sailing? Because it has with the Olympics in Marseille and with Barcelona last year, it has kind of fallen off a little bit because there has been this approach to things. And how do you think it's different for you guys?
Well, I think the struggles are still the same, like every cycle of the cup. And, in the United States, you look at it, sailing is not as big of a spectator sport as, it is in other countries. And, we have some ideas on how we can bridge that. And, we look forward to the opportunity to implement those as we get closer to this, and hopefully, bring a new generation of audience into the cup, and also, you know, make it feel, inclusive, and, want to follow it.
I think that's such a good answer. I was in Levy, Finland we're involved in the ski world. We were in Levy, Finland a couple weeks ago for the World Cup. I'm calling you from Colorado for the Birds of Prey. In Levy, there was 40,000 people watching a ski race. In the Birds of Prey, one of the best races in the world, they've got 10,000 seats filled. So it really is a different, you can't judge it by what we look at numbers. And maybe that's kind of the point.
Yeah, I think, numbers can be added up and subtracted and moved around and stuff. But if you look at it from a whole, and you look at the trend in what you see in Sail GP, which I think is promising for the potential of the America's Cup. And, if certain things go a certain direction, I think you could see a very successful, TV broadcast, and a lot of fans being, incorporated into watching it.
I won't suggest that you're Rudy of the football fame movie, but if you win an America's Cup, what do you think that means to you and Riptide?
Oh, it'd be amazing. It'd be the pinnacle of our achievement to be able to say that. And yeah, I don't know. It's not really something that has crossed my mind yet. First, we have to get into the cup, and that's the hurdle.
You haven't daydreamed a little bit?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I've daydreamed since I learned to sail at 10 years old on the coast of Maine. I read, when there's no wind, we'd be reading the sailing magazines, and, looking at guys like Dean Barker and Emirates Team New Zealand on the pages. And I always imagined maybe one day I'll be one of those guys. And now I have the opportunity to do it.
I've had a chance to talk to some of your match sailing competitors, and I've talked to you a little bit, and I know there's a fire that burns deep inside. I'm saying that from, I guess, being a little arrogant and reading into it, but the daydream to have a race like that, I know the competitor in you, it's not going to be there's no stone going to be left unturned in terms of the approach of this. And I think that's the thing that makes this really unique for you, because you really are fighting uphill, but it doesn't matter because there's never been anybody kind of doing this. I don't think anybody's ever done this kind of an approach to things, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I would have much rather had, months and years to prepare for this. But, when opportunity knocks, you kind of have to just go for it. And this opportunity started to present itself. And, So we couldn't say no to it, and we're going to give it we're going to give it a real try. And yeah, we're not going to leave any detail overlooked. We're going to take what funding we succeed in, we successfully raise, and put it towards the areas where we feel will be the most advantageous to make us competitive. And if we happen to find some, advantages over our competitors, then we look forward to crossing that road, when we can sling it with the top teams.
Last couple of questions. I'm going to make this wrong again. Shawanka, did I say that right?
Sawanica.
Salonika. How do you talk a yacht club and the Swanica into that premise, that process? How do you get them involved?
Well, Swanica is no stranger to the America's Cup. From 1893 to 1903, the America's Cup used the Swanica rule to determine the cup boats. And Swanica also has its own deed of gift match race trophy called the Swanica Cup. So it's not unfamiliar territory to them. Obviously, New York Yacht Club and St. Francis and San Diego are the big clubs that have been involved in America's Cups past, and Swanica has its own history. A lot of the Commodores of New York Yacht Club were also members of Swanica back in the early 1900s. So there is overlap there, but nobody's actually flown the Burgee. But this club is, very passionate about racing and sailing, both on at the inter club level and all the way up to, world championships. They've backed me since I became a member, and this is kind of the natural progression that we've talked about since I joined the club.
I went online to see if I could find some background on the rule, and the rule event was replaced by Herreshoff's universal rule, which has eventually been used, subsequently since that time. And the funny part is we've had all these conversations over the last 30 years about IOR, PHRF, and all of these different rules. And if you read some of the scribblings from the 1901 archives that are actually at the National Institute, you'd swear to God they're arguing about stuff today. It's the same arguments about weight and size and thickness and all the rest of it. So yachtsmen have been arguing about the same crap, so to speak, for a long time. So they're obviously not rookies at the premise, but it's nice to see a different face show up for sure.
Yeah. No, I mean it's funny, as much as things change, some things always stay the same.
Yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate your time. I can't tell you how much we're going to follow this. I think this would be really cool to just sort of stay with it and through the stages. And Chris, I can't tell you how much it's really cool. I really wish you the best of luck, and anything we can do to promote you and certainly winning would be pretty cool.
No worries, Greg. Thank you very much for having me. And yeah, we're new to this, and we're, just kind of getting going, but we're making the right steps and the right conversations are being had. And, we'll know by January 31st whether this is going to succeed. And when January 31st comes and we are in, then, that's when the hard work is really going to begin for us.
Best of luck.
Thank you very much, Greg.
That was Chris Poole, and I think it's going to be really interesting following the syndicate. We hope that they get to the January 31st deadline. I'm sure they've had conversations with other AC syndicates about buying a boat. We've been trying to figure all this out, but I think it's going to be a really good storyline to differentiate what maybe has been in the past couple of challenges, and we'll see what happens. At 36, sometimes you get the opportunities. You don't think about what might be in front of you. You just kind of plow through it. We wish Chris and his crew the best, and we'll be back in March, but we wanted to be able to bring you the bonus edition of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. So happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and we'll see you in about 4 months.